We've never done this before, so June 6th is as good a time to do it as ever, right? First time, Locked On Gators, mock recruiting class.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Thursday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter, WNS_Brandon. I am very grateful to be your host. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. And like I said, this is going to be the first time that I've ever done a mock class. Probably going to suck. I wasn't good at mock drafts either. I always used to make the joke that, hey, you call them mock drafts and mock classes because you're going to get mocked for doing them. But I get mocked for doing a lot, right? I'm me. I'm weird. So I'm fine with it. I will say all current commits are automatically in here. Whether or not, we think they're going to stick, whatever it is. I know that there's people who think Jalen Wiggins is going to flip to Florida State, which is it's possible. Anybody can leave. But if you're a Florida Gators commit, you're in this class. Also, disclaimer, this will be wrong and things will change even from today, Thursday, June 6th to Monday. Things could change, but that's the fun part of it, right? Let's have a little bit of fun here. The first, and we're going to go how we do most roster breakdowns, quarterback and pass catchers here, then trench warfare, and then the back seven. We're going to start with quarterback, and I will say this. I put Tramel Jones here, Florida State commit. I'm not super sold on him coming to Florida. But I'm also the type where I'm like, hey, it's going to be hard, I think, for Florida to land any quality quarterback commit in this cycle. And at that point, you might just punt on the position. But I do think that they're still going to try to get one. And I think Tramel Jones is the most likely if they land any quarterbacks. And also, it'd be great to take someone from Florida State. But I think Tramel Jones is the most likely option at quarterback. And here, he's in the class. At running back, we know that Florida wants to take two running backs. Right now, they have two running backs in Waltez Clark and Chad Gasper. For Waltez Clark, Central Florida is a bit of a concern. I mean, he visited last week. He's taking an official visit, I think, this weekend for their bounce house weekend or whatever the hell they call it there. That they think they're cool because they're fun and they're zany and wild. But Waltez Clark is I like to call them flight risks at this point. I do think that Waltez Clark is a flight risk here. Not saying that he's gone, but it is possible that he's going to bounce. Get it? Bounce. I hate myself sometimes too. It's fine. I will say that Chad Gasper, I'm a fan of his skill set. I know that I had an NFL back's comments in here when Chad Gasper committed about playing running back out of the pistol, and it is harder than most spots. So Chad Gasper plays out of the pistol a lot already in high school. Could be pretty enticing at that point to say, hey, maybe he can translate early on. And also, you watch his high school film, and Chad Gasper's playing in the slot out wide. He's moving around a lot as a pass catcher, and he played for a team that threw the football all around the yard. So I do think that Chad Gasper coming in could contribute early, especially if he's able to contribute as a pass catcher at the SEC level as well. Could see him there. Wide receiver, we got four guys in here. We know that Florida targeting four. There are some positions where I'm like, hey, we know Florida wants this number of players, so I put that number of players. They might not be able to end up with that many players. Maybe they only get one running back. Maybe it's just Chad Gasper. Maybe they get three receivers, whatever it may be. But we know they're targeting four. So for this class, I included four. Those four, Nashawn Montgomery and Joshua Moore, who were both on campus this past weekend for official visits. I think Florida nailed the first weekend. Nayshawn Montgomery is visiting Penn State this coming weekend. And I think that we can expect an announcement probably within a couple of weeks after that. It kind of feels like it's just Florida and Penn State right now. We know that Miami was in it a bit, but it feels like it's Florida or Penn State at this point. And so Nayshawn Montgomery, after that official visit to Penn State, maybe we get a decision soon. Joshua Moore, I was iffy going into the weekend, but during the visit is when quarterback Will Griffin committed to the Florida Gators. And Joshua Moore, multiple times now, has been like, yeah, I think it's really awesome that you've got your answer at quarterback. Also, important to note, Joshua Moore is listed as 6'4", very different from the usual Florida recruit that we've seen at receiver. But Joshua Moore said, hey, like, having DJ Lagway for 2024 and Will Griffin for 2026 means that I have a QB my entire time in Gainesville. Like I've got Lagway and then I've got Will Griffin. I've got my QB my entire time. I love that, and that's what we've talked about frequently since Will Griffin committed. In the short time he committed, we've been saying, hey, that's a real thing for other positions. You talk about any of the pass catching types. You talk about the offensive line. And you're going to say, hey, they've got their QB answers. Like that matters a lot. And while you might be punting on quarterback in 2025, you're kind of you're situating yourself to fill up the roster at other spots with quality players there. Kobe Howard is the third receiver I have listed here. And I will say Kobe Howard was, I think, the first player that I sent to the insider program, which the link's in the description below, where I was like, hey, we still to this day don't have a name for what my predictions are. But Kobe Howard was the first one that I said Florida. I will say that I've cooled on that a little bit, but I'm still keeping the prediction here. And if it changes, I will let people know. But I've cooled on it a little bit, but I'm still keeping it. But also, or partially because he's still pretty high in Florida, to my knowledge. And Florida or Kobe Howard has a late official visit with Florida. Florida does a lot of their work with official visits during the summer, but Kobe Howard is set to visit. I think it's November 14th is the start of his official visit. That means that they'll have him on campus late throughout the year, and I think that's the Ole Miss game, November 14th. No, that's the LSU game. Which come on, that's gonna be sick. And I think that's a black jersey game too. But Kobe Howard is someone that they'll have him on campus. I'm sure I want to say at least 2 more times during the summer. And then you have that late official visit, pretty close to signing day at that point too. If he's uncommitted or even if he is committed but holds the official visit somewhere, like if he's committed somewhere else but holds the official visit, Florida getting that atmosphere there where I think the LSU game is going to be a night game this year. It's going to be hard to resist that if you're a recruit. So I do think that Florida is going to, like right now, again, like I've cooled on him right now. But when you look at what's going to be happening in 6 months, Kobe Howard might have some momentum with the Florida Gators. And the last receiver that I put is CJ Ingram, Cornelius Ingram's son, legacy player here. I think most Gators fans are kind of expecting him in the class at this point. At tight end, you got Tayshawn Gelsey and Micah Jones. I gave the prediction for Tayshawn Gelsey and Nayshawn Montgomery also, by the way, before the official visits happened last week. There is no reason for me to think otherwise for Tayshawn Gelsey right now. I do think that he's still going to be a Florida Gator. Micah Jones is becoming an SEC battle, I guess. It's Florida, LSU, and Mississippi State also has a visit coming in. I believe Ole Miss was in there as well, but not really. So for Micah Jones, I do think it's becoming a battle here. I could see a wrench being thrown into this early because this weekend Florida's got Hollis Davidson III is on campus this weekend visiting Florida. If he commits, then maybe Andrew Olesh is also a tight end that's going to be on campus this weekend. Like if one of those guys commits, then I think that things change because I think that the way they're looking at the tight end position for 2025, they want 2 tight ends. I think they're kind of looking at it as, hey, we're taking 2 tight ends. Ideally, we're taking 2 tight ends. these are the guys that we're interested in. These are the guys that we have committable offers with. First two in go. I don't think it's going to be a situation where they're like, hey, like hypothetically, Hollis Davidson wants to commit to Florida. I don't think they're going to be like, hey, we want to wait for Tayshaun Gelsey and Micah Jones' decisions first. I think that they're going to be, okay, go ahead. We got 2 spots. These are the guys that we're willing to take. Come on in. I don't think they're going to be waiting on any of them, especially because you look at it and a lot of them are 3-star players. I don't think you really hold spots for those frequently. So at tight end, I think that's what we're mostly looking at. Again, I do think that the guys that were on campus this past weekend in Micah Jones and Tayshaun Gelsey are the most likely commits. But again, I think things will change as they take other official visits and as Florida also has other tight ends come in for official visits. We are about to look at the trenches for the Florida Gators, which has been hit or miss on the recruiting trail. We can call it what it is. But first, a quick word from Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer that it gets to tip off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And you could also buy concert tickets, comedy show tickets. I know that I've said it before. I went to see Anita perform this past Monday night, doing the By Leaf Mug experience, but it was the dopest thing just the coolest experience. I bought my tickets on Game Time. If you haven't listened to Anita's Funk Generation album, it's not for everyone. I love it though. Anita's a fantastic artist. I'm just going to say that. Thank you guys for buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. Looking at the offensive line, that's a bit of a rough one. I put 4 players in here. I'm gonna let you know that this is the mock class where I'm kind of swinging for the fences on the O-line. I don't know. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think Florida lands all 4 of these guys right now. Or I feel decent about them right now, but I'm saying by the time we get to December, things can change. But first off, Zaire Addison, I'm putting in there. You're out of your freaking mind if you think that I'm doing the first mock class I've ever done, and I'm not including the guy that I've said, hey, priority number 1 on the O-line, because that's what Zaire Addison is to me. He's priority number 1 on the O-line. I understand that there's other higher ranking offensive linemen like Solomon Thomas, who is in this mock class, but I'm going to value a tight end. I'm going to value a tackle over an interior offensive lineman. Just is what it is. Even if you're really good at it, I'm going to value that positional value there. I did say Solomon Thomas is in this class. Tavares Dice is in this class. Both of them are committed elsewhere. Solomon Thomas committed to Florida State. Tavares Dice committed to Auburn right now. Both are flip candidates, and I genuinely think Florida has a realistic chance with both of them. I think Solomon Thomas might wind up at LSU. I do think there's enough outside pressure to entice him to flip from Florida State. Like, again, LSU apparently knocked it out of the park with their visit last week, but he doesn't want to go that far from home. So if they can kind of just pull his attention and pull his attraction away from Florida State, Florida can capitalize on that. And that's what I'm saying there. And again, yeah, there is speculation that the distance from home is a bit of an issue. So, or is a bit of a negative for him. So there's that. I spoke with a source, the Locked On Gators insiders got this yesterday. I spoke with a source that Auburn feels like Tavares Dice is kind of 50-50 between Auburn and Florida. And I don't know, this might just be the skeptic in me, and maybe this is just like a Florida thing that like the Florida Gators, not state of Florida. But I feel like when there's a player commits somewhere and then months down the line, you go, yeah, he's kind of 50-50 between these 2 schools. I feel like the school that got the initial commitment rarely wins that battle, because if someone's actually committed, they can tend to just go, okay, now I'm good. Or it's like, yeah, they're pulling but it's like 70-30 in favor of staying. But they feel it's 50-50. I feel like if you're saying it's 50-50 and you're committed somewhere else and it's because the other school's coming in late, I feel like it's tough to hold on there. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just where I stand on it. And Taryn Hedrick, who is also visiting campus this weekend, is someone that I do think Florida could take at the bottom of their offensive line class, which we know Florida tends to take guys at the bottom of the offensive line class that they feel they can develop and work with. And Taryn Hedrick may be a 3-star, but this is not a 3-star offer list. We talk about that pretty frequently. And I don't think that it winds up ending I don't think he ends up as a 3-star when it's all said and done. You look at the schools that are recruiting him, and the main two schools that are in there are Florida and Texas. As in the two schools that you hear most frequently with Taryn Hedrick are Florida and Texas. There's also Kentucky, Purdue, and one other school. I forgot what it is. But then you also consider Florida is the only school that Taryn Hedrick has an official visit with. Just saying. They're the only in-state school that he has an official visit with. Sorry. Florida's the only in-state school he has an official visit with. The other 4 official visits are out of state. Maybe he wants to leave, but I'm just saying for now, Taryn Hedrick, if he wants to stay close to home, Florida's the best bet. Defensive line, I have Jeremiah McLeod, who's currently committed to the Florida Gators, and Jarquez Carter. I'm a fan of Jeremiah McLeod's game. I said that when he committed. I watched his film, and I was like, okay, quick first step, positional versatility. He might need a little bit to get ready. I'm not so convinced that he's able to step in early and be able to play and contribute. But I don't know. I do think that he's got a ceiling and he's got some tools that you can't really teach. So I'll take that 10 times out of 10 and I'll bank on potential. I'm that kind of fan or that kind of evaluator, whatever it is, where I go, hey, yeah, we're banking on potential because if you hit, you hit, and it's really good. So I will bank on potential with Jeremiah McLeod. Jarquez Carter's an in-state kid that official visited last weekend with the Florida Gators. And then yesterday was on campus again because they had their camps. It feels like the Florida Gators have a lot of momentum here with Jarquez Carter, and things can change. But right now, I think most Florida Gators fans look at Jarquez Carter and say, hey, we feel like we should land this one, and I feel the same way about it. On the edge, I put 2, and I'm going to let you know, realistically, I think this might be an either-or situation, but for now, I put 2. Jalen Wiggins, current Florida commit. Javian Hilson, current Florida State commit. Jalen Wiggins is being pursued by Florida State, mostly when it's not Florida. I considered putting him on the D-line. I also want to just put, because this is edge. I considered putting him on the D-line, but he's 6'4", 255. He's probably going to be playing on the edge at that size. Even if he gains a bit of weight, Florida's edges are pretty big. They're 265 right now. Pretty big guys there. Javian Hilson took the official visit to Florida. The rumor is his head is turning. And he's coming back to Gainesville for the Miami game, which, by the way, I will also be there. But that's a huge game to bring anyone in for. And I think that bringing in recruits and flip targets for that game, you're setting yourself up to go, hey, this is going to be just a monumental recruiting weekend and potential recruiting weekend, I guess we'll say. But I do think that this could wind up being, hey, if Florida State flips Jalen Wiggins, then Florida will flip Javian Hilson. Or if Florida flips Javian Hilson, then Florida State will probably flip Jalen Wiggins. It just feels like we're headed towards what might be essentially a trade if that happens. To wrap up today's show, we're talking about the back 7 here. And we're starting with linebacker, as you should with the back 7, and as you should when we go basically down the line. But linebacker, I'm going Christian Gass and Miles Johnson. Ideally, and this is not a knock on Miles Johnson at all. Just want to get that one out there already. Ideally, if Florida brings in 2 linebackers, you bring in Christian Gass and Tavian Wallace, who, again, for me, Tavian Wallace is linebacker 1 priority-wise. Huge fan of his game. Right now, I just feel like he's going to commit to Florida State. And so while some of these predictions are me kind of saying, hey, I value this guy more. Like, I think I think you really have to hammer it home, whatever it may be. I just don't look at Christian Gas and Tavian Wallace as both are going to be Florida Gators right now. I think you can get Christian Gas. I think you can get Tavian Wallace, and you can get them both. But right now, Tavian Wallace for me, he's trending Florida State. It's hard for me to just all of a sudden go, yeah, everything says Florida State right now, but trust me, it's Florida, especially because he has his official visit with Florida State on June 21st, and then he's committing 8 days later. They're going to be fresh in his mind. But I do think Christian Gas is someone that you can land. And Miles Johnson is on campus this weekend. And he's one that I'm kind of fully going in on right now, where he's committed to Alabama. He hasn't been on campus in Alabama and Tuscaloosa in a few months. And he's from the state of Alabama. He's an in-state kid. I know that states are big and it could take you a while to get places, but he's committed there, hasn't been there in a couple of months, does not have an official visit scheduled with them. I do think that he's going to schedule one during the season, and so that's why it might not be a huge priority right now. But as far as how things are trending, there's reports, I think it was On3, said that Florida might actually be recruiting Miles Johnson harder than Alabama is right now. He's visiting campus this weekend, doesn't have an OV scheduled with Bama. Reading the tea leaves here, I feel like you can look at it and say, hey, maybe Miles Johnson is going to be a Florida Gator. And in this mock, he is. Going to cornerback now. We're going corner and then safety. And I'm not putting nickel or star, whatever you want to call it. But corner, going Ben Hanks Jr. and Chris McCorkle. I wanted to put DJ Pickett. I did, but I just feel like I'm a liar if I did. Realistically, Florida, you could push as hard as you want for DJ Pickett. You got kind of a long way to go to land him. This is not a situation where I think Florida's in the top 3, 4, maybe even 5 for DJ Pickett. So if you do want to land him, it's going to take a lot of work. Ben Hanks Jr. is on campus this weekend. He's a legacy, of course, if you recognize the name Ben Hanks. His dad's a 2-time All-SEC linebacker for the Florida Gators in the 90s, before I was born. But I do know who Ben Hanks was. I almost said Ben Hanks Jr. I do know who Ben Hanks is. But if you don't know, but now you know. That's a bar. And Ben Hanks Jr. Has maybe the most airtight recruitment of everybody that Florida's recruiting right now for the 2025 class. Every year, there's a couple of kids where we go, yeah, mum's the word, and no one knows anything about what's going on with him. That seems to be the case with Ben Hanks Jr. right now. Nobody can know anything. Everybody thinks he's Miami bound, but then he does an interview and he's like, hey, Florida's way closer than you guys are giving him credit for, which I'm not really sure what that even means. But I do think Florida can make it happen. I do think having a legacy helps. And again, I feel like I'm just banking on Will Harris here. I feel like Will Harris has done a really good job recruiting so far. I think Florida tends to do really well on these official visits. If you can land Ben Hanks Jr., you can land him. And I do think that it's important to acknowledge that when you have an airtight recruitment like this, where there's just no noise coming out anywhere, it's really tough to know whether that means they're close to a decision or not. Like Ben Hanks Jr. commit, and we go, oh, like it was airtight because he kind of knew what he was going to do. It was airtight because he was assignment, whatever it may be. Or it could take forever, and you go, yeah, it's airtight because he doesn't really know what he's doing, so he can't give you insight. Could go either way. And then I also put another corner in here as Chris McCorkle. Chris McCorkle is from Cardinal Mooney in Sarasota. He's committed to Indiana right now, committed there about 2 months ago. But I get the feel that if Florida pushed for him, they could get him. Like, they could flip him. I do. Again, I realistically, like, I genuinely feel like that he maybe wasn't a take right now for Florida. But as you get closer to, like, Teddy Foster, if we're talking about Teddy Foster in June last year, I don't know how convinced we are that he's at the top of their board, right? And I kind of think you could, and Teddy Foster from Cardinal Mooney as well in Sarasota. Chris McCorkle, kind of in that same area. I also do think it's important to acknowledge that while Chris McCorkle is committed to Indiana and committed to Indiana 2 months ago, he kept his visits with this weekend, Michigan State, and next weekend, Iowa. After he committed to Indiana, He kept those, and he did visit Indiana again this past weekend. So it's not like he visited Indiana, shut it down. Nope. He visited Indiana this past weekend and is still taking OVs elsewhere. I kind of feel like he's at Indiana to have a spot, and that if a bigger program came calling, he might go. And again, Chris McCorkle, you got a teammate in Teddy Foster. He's been on campus multiple times. Last year, he was coming to campus with Teddy Foster. I think that Florida should have a leg up here if they really wanted to pursue Chris McCorkle. And I think they might if they're coming down to the wire and they're looking for another corner to add to their class. Safety, Caleb Singleton and Hilton Stubbs. Just hear me out. Caleb Singleton is a priority for the Florida Gators. He has been a priority for the Florida Gators. And I feel like a kid that's that low ranked, I guess we'll say, for Florida to prioritize him will mean a lot to him. And I do think that he'll eventually commit to Florida. He was one of the few kids where I was like, hey, maybe he pops this past weekend, although I wasn't expecting it, but it was a possibility. Hilton Stubbs, the day he committed to USC, or sorry, maybe not the day, because I think he committed on a Friday or Saturday night, but the show after that, I talked about him and I was like, hey, I don't see him sticking with USC. And it's nothing on him. It's nothing on USC. It's just really hard to retain a commitment all year round. Because it was like January when he committed. So all year round to signing day across the country. That's just a really hard sell there, especially when things can get a bit tough for USC this year with the conference realignment and everything changing. It's probably going to be tougher for them this year. So could be a bit tough for them. If they have a rough year, we could see things go downhill. That's it for the class. I will say this. I feel like with this class, was kind of like, hey, some guys I just really think you should land. I know there's going to be some guys Florida gets in for late nights. Right now, this class with the 24/7 class calculator would have ranked 13th last year. Suffice to say, wouldn't be ideal. You would have to need, or your evals would need to be spot on, but also rankings will change and guys will climb. In Florida, more often than not, when they add a recruit or they're recruiting a kid, their rankings rise. They're really good at evaluating. So their rankings tend to rise. So realistically, while they look like 13th now, I think it's a safe bet to say that these kids will rise by the time signing day comes around, for the most part. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews in the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow, talk more recruiting with Brian Smith. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country and NFL 33, and I will see you all next time.